The morning of January 1st, 2025, arrived with a brightness that seemed unnatural. Marcus blinked against the sunlight streaming through his bedroom window, momentarily disoriented. For a moment, he felt like he had overslept, like he had missed something important. But then it hit him. The procedure was done. He sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair. The lightness he felt wasn't just in his body, it was in his mind. The heaviness that had followed him for years, the constant background noise of regret and grief, was gone. It was as though someone had turned down the volume on his thoughts, leaving only a serene silence. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, testing his balance. Everything felt the same, and yet it didn't. He walked to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face and staring at his reflection in the mirror. His eyes looked clearer, his posture straighter. "This is it," he whispered to himself. "A fresh start." For the first time in years, he felt hopeful. The day passed in a blur of small victories. Marcus went for a run, something he hadn't done in months. He cleaned his apartment, throwing away old junk he no longer felt attached to. He even called a few friends he hadn't spoken to in ages, surprising them with his upbeat tone. "You sound good, man," his friend Kevin said over the phone. "Like, really good." "I feel good," Marcus replied, and he meant it. By the time night fell, Marcus was exhausted but content. He climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to his chin, and drifted off to sleep almost instantly. That's when the dreams began. In the dream, Marcus found himself standing in a hospital room. The walls were a muted beige, the kind that seemed designed to sap the energy from anyone who entered. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and something sour. His father lay in the bed, his once strong frame reduced to a frail shadow of itself. The sight hit Marcus like a punch to the gut, though he couldn't explain why. He stepped closer, drawn to the man's face. His father's eyes opened slowly, and when they met Marcus's, they were filled with a depth of emotion that made his chest ache. "Don't let this break you," his father said, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus tried to respond, but his throat felt tight. He reached out to touch his father's hand, but before he could, the scene shifted. He was no longer in the hospital room. Now he was in his old apartment, the one he had shared with Vanessa. She was there too, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by paint swatches and fabric samples. "I think this one," she said, holding up a swatch of deep blue. Her smile was radiant, the kind that made Marcus feel like the luckiest man in the world. He opened his mouth to agree, but the scene shifted again. Now they were fighting. Vanessa's face was red with anger, her voice sharp and cutting. "You never listen, Marcus. You're so wrapped up in your own head, you don't even see what's right in front of you." Marcus wanted to argue, to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. He could only watch as she grabbed her coat and stormed out the door, slamming it behind her. The dream dissolved into darkness, and Marcus woke up with a start. His heart was pounding, his sheets damp with sweat. He sat up, running a hand over his face, trying to shake the lingering images from his mind. "What the hell was that?" he muttered. The next day, Marcus tried to push the dream out of his mind. He told himself it was just a fluke, a random jumble of thoughts that didn't mean anything. But that night, it happened again. This time he was at a dinner party, surrounded by laughter and the clinking of glasses. He recognized the faces around the table, friends he hadn't seen in years. The scene was warm and inviting, but it felt wrong, like an echo of something he couldn't quite place. As he reached for his glass, the scene shifted. He was alone in his office, staring at a blank computer screen. The weight of failure pressed down on him, suffocating and inescapable. The dreams continued night after night, each one more vivid than the last. They weren't just random images. They were fragments of memories, pieces of a puzzle he no longer had the key to. Marcus began keeping a journal, writing down everything he could remember from the dreams. At first, The entries were short and disjointed. Dad in hospital said something about not breaking. Felt important. Vanessa, laughing, then angry. Why? Dinner party, friends, felt happy but strange. But as the dreams persisted, the entries grew longer, more detailed. He started to see patterns, connections he hadn't noticed before. The memories weren't just about pain. They were about love, growth, and the moments that had shaped him. The dreams weren't haunting him. They were trying to tell him something. One night, Marcus dreamed of a fire. He was standing in the middle of his childhood home, flames licking at the walls, the heat unbearable. He felt panic rising in his chest, but then he saw his father standing in the doorway, calm and unbothered by the flames. "You can't erase the fire, son," his father said. "It's what forged you." Marcus woke up gasping for air, his father's words echoing in his mind. He knew then that he couldn't ignore the dreams any longer. They weren't just fragments of his past. They were pieces of himself, pieces he had tried to erase, but couldn't fully let go of. The days that followed were a blur of introspection and doubt. Marcus found himself questioning the decision he had made, wondering if he had been too quick to trade his pain for the promise of freedom. He returned to mind renewal labs, demanding answers. Clara greeted him with the same practiced warmth, but Marcus could see the flicker of concern in her eyes. "Marcus, this isn't uncommon," she said after he explained what was happening. "The memories may be gone, but the emotions tied to them can linger. Your mind is trying to reconcile the loss." "But why am I dreaming about them?" Marcus asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "Dreams are complex," Clara replied. "They're your mind's way of processing emotions and experiences. Even without the memories, your subconscious is still working through the impact they had on you." Marcus left the office feeling more confused than ever. He had thought the procedure would bring him peace, but instead, it had stirred something deeper within him. As he walked home, the city lights blurring in the distance, Marcus realized he was at a crossroads. He could continue to run from his past, or he could face it head-on, piece by piece, and try to understand what it was trying to teach him.